Welcome to the Dr. Dad's podcast, where a naturopath and chiropractor come together each week to share lifestyle medicine, health advice, and inspiring interviews with some of the top experts in health and wellness, bringing you the latest in nutrition, exercise, ancient healing, toxins and detox, your microbiome, mindset, hormones, brain, and much more. Stay tuned. We're going to teach you how to experience growth daily. Hey everybody, you're listening to the Dr. Dads. Welcome. Dr. Nick, what's up, man?
It's always good to see you, buddy. And your facial hair keeps changing as well, and so I can't help but notice that you look extra fresh today.
I look like a little kid, man. Like all my patients are like, yeah, you look so much older with your beard because you have the salty black and white, and now you look like a little kid. I'm like, well, thanks. Yeah, it's nice to know I can just anti-age by shaving the beard, so that's good.
It's one strategy that we should be promoting a little bit more often, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Part of the process.
But you got to have the beard for the first little bit so that you create that contrast and then you shave it off. And so
yes, and then it's like a new beginning.
There you go.
Hey man, so I need a release today. And speaking of release, we're going to talk about a really fun instrument that I literally use every single day in my practice. Really just another solution to doctors for people that have issues with what we're going to speak today. So we're bringing this guy that we're going to bring on today. I literally see this guy almost like at every conference that we go to, not just with HCF, but Cal Jam. I mean, I've seen you on and off throughout the last 5 years, Jeff. So I have Jeff Maier on today. Jeff, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Sounds like a great, fun podcast to be on.
So we're going to talk about the rapid release today. And before we kind of get into it and talk to Jeff a little bit, I just kind of want to give my personal experience with this instrument and what it does for me on a daily basis to help people. So this is we'll get into more detail on the exact nature of it, but would you say this is a percussion instrument, Jeff? Or would this be I kind of want to say this is in its own arena.
It really is, because percussive devices have been around since the 1900s, actually. And the percussive devices that you see out there today are really the same technology that you've seen 120 years ago. They all are very slow and they have a long stroke.
Yeah.
And so they work good on the belly of the muscle, but a lot of the issues happen on the endpoints of the muscles. And ours works at a frequency that's very special, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so I got to say this thing doesn't even fit in the same boat, because before you're using the rapid release, I used a lot of other percussive instruments, but it just doesn't give the results and the release that this instrument does. And, it's been a joy to use this thing, man, because, you get a patient on the table and there's so many different things that you can use with this instrument, and the release that you give in the short amount of time that you're using it is just incredible. But I'm able to get things done within minutes, in seconds with some areas of the body that literally if you were having to use other percussive devices, or if you were manually having to address the soft tissue or the fascia in that area, you could not get the release that this thing can get for you. And you can use it everywhere. I mean, I use this thing all over the body. There's really nowhere I don't think that I haven't used this thing. But my hat's off to you guys, man. Like, you guys engineered an amazing device, and it's changing people's lives. And your company's great. I mean, I've literally worn mine out, and you guys have had to replace it because I use them so much. But I mean, these things are nonstop at my office, and my patients love them. They're not invasive. It's a gentle release, and they get up off the table and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing. And it just blows them away. And then now I'm using 2 at a time. You guys taught me that recently. Wow. So that double arc, man, it's like on another level. So you guys just kind of re-excited that for me again. But let's get into it, man. Like, talk a little bit about what sets this instrument apart from other percussive devices, and what is the uniqueness about this?
Well, the key is really in the frequency. I could talk about the frequency for about the rest of the show if you want to, but the way we designed it is there's a French doctor named Dr. Nogier. 1972, he wrote a book on the different frequencies of different body parts. Everything has a resonant frequency, and when you match that frequency, you can very efficiently hit it with targeted energy. So in this case, he says that scar tissue vibrates at 147 hertz. So by sending a frequency at that some pulses at that frequency, they travel very efficiently through blood, fat, and skin until they hit something they resonate with, which in this case would be type 3 collagen. So that's ligaments, tendons, fascia, and scar tissue. And the interesting thing about those type of tissues is that's where a lot of musculoskeletal pain comes from. 85% of Americans have or will have myofascial pain. And there's very little blood flow in any of those structures. So they really need external stimulus to heal. And for example, you could break a bone and your muscle can heal and your bone will heal. But if the fascia is still messed up, that can cause pain. It can cause restricted range of movement. It can actually cause loss of proprioception as well. And when you add rapid release to it, especially with older people, a lot of them, their fascia kind of becomes dehydrated and more two-dimensional. And when you add vibration and heat into the interstitial space, which is where the fascia resides, and there's hyaluronic acid there, it increases the viscosity of the hyaluronic acid, and it allows the fascia to flow. And a lot of our doctors are reporting it's kind of like doing a volumizing shampoo for your fascia. And I had a very interesting experience. I've got a fusion in my low back, and I would get tightness all the time, like on the top of my butt cheeks and along both sides of my paraspinalis and the lower back. And rapid release was a godsend for me because I would, I could get rid of those spasms and cramps pretty quickly. But it wasn't until my massage therapist, or now she's my massage therapist. Back then she called me up and she said, "You got to see what I'm doing with this thing. I'm doing miracles all the time." And I hear that a lot at rapid release. So, I was like, yeah. And, I was enthusiastic for her, but, I heard it so much that I wasn't really thinking too much about it. But then she said, "Come down here. I want to show you, I'll give you a free massage." And as soon as she said free massage, I was like, okay. And I went down there and saw her in San Clemente, and I told her where I hurt. I said, "This is the problem area right here." And I pointed to it, and she goes, "I know what I'm doing." She made me lay face up. I thought that was kind of strange. And she did me from head to toe with rapid release. She was using 2 of them. And, and then finally it was time to flip over. And I said, "All right, well, this is where I want you to work on." And she goes, "I know what I'm doing." And she did my back from head to toe too. And she never really touched that part of me other than just as much as she did any other part of my body. And then she had me flip over a 3rd time. And when I flipped back to lay on my back, I heard a lot of bones crack in my body. And then she just walked around the table and I pulled my arms and fingers and toes and my body was a snap, crackle, pop. And it kind of like popped itself back into equilibrium, and my body's never been the same since then. It's been better, and instead of having that pain in my low back where I was having to deal with it once or twice a day, now it was like once or twice a week, because it allowed my fascia to realign itself, I believe. And I just felt so much better. It was kind of like having a body, a Rolfing session. I've gone through Rolfing, and it was over $2,000 and 10 hour-and-a-half sessions, and not very pleasant either. And since then, I've learned that when I go to her house, I go for like a maintenance, just because I love her and I love to hear all the stories she comes up with. But afterwards, I go and get a float at a float tank. So I go get an hour-and-a-half massage from her with 2 rapid releases all over every square inch of my body, and then I go do a float tank, and it's I feel better. I'm almost 60 right now, and I feel like better than I did when I was 15.
That's amazing.
That's such a great story, man. I mean, we always talk about how this continuous connective tissue matrix, the fascia, runs from head to toe, right? And is literally intertwined into every living cell of our body. So when you look at something like that and you hear that story, that makes complete sense to me, man. Like, you can't just focus on the area of concern. You have to sometimes work very far away from it to actually get everything to come back into homeostasis. And it's this massive connective tissue matrix. So that's where that feeling better is coming from. Like you said, there's not a lot of blood supply in this tissue, but it's communicating information all day. And so when you start to open that back up, the whole system just starts to work better.
Is that the same lady that you invited to the Newport conference?
It is.
Oh, man.
She's magical.
She was.
And she gets
It's
emotional
amazing.
releases all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
she can tell what kind of trauma people have been through just by the way their bodies react. And, they say the issues are in the tissues, and they also call the fascia the spiritual skin because it
Mm.
remembers. And it's also the most sensory rich tissue in our body. And another interesting fact about it is that it would be the biggest organ in our body if it was considered an organ.
Well, I would honestly call it an organ. I don't really care if science has called it that or not. But no, I'm no joke, man. Like with what I've understood of this, I learned a lot more about fascia after I got out of school from some pretty bright PhDs. But yeah, man, it's its own communication network. I mean, me and Nick talk about this all the time and the importance of addressing your fascia for your overall health. But yeah, man, it's a very, very highly functional working system that needs to be taken care of for us to be well.
I have
Mm-hmm.
a case I'd like to illustrate that. My wife had really bad neck pain for many, many years, and she went to physical therapists, she went to chiropractors, she went to massage therapists, and nobody could get that pain out of her neck. And we were at actually the same show, the Dr. Pompa, when he was in Tennessee. One of our practitioners was there that has great success with rapid release, and I said, Dr. Muller, can you see if you can help my wife with her neck pain? And he said, sure. And he got the rapid release and he put it inside her big toe, ran back to her heel, up the inside of her leg, up and over her belly button, and was going to start coming down the other side, and it released her neck. And I was just incredulous. Both of us were. And we're like, what just happened? And he goes, oh, that was the deep frontal spiral line. And
Wow.
okay, so that's from the anatomy trains. And he was very skilled and he knew what he was doing, but I'm thinking Debbie, my massage therapist, she's hitting all those points by hitting every spot in my body. So she doesn't know what a fascia train is, but she has a PhD in results.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Well, it just goes to show that, whether that's connected to the acupuncture meridians or, other energy grids in the body, when you activate a release along a certain meridian line like that, or fascial train, as you said, you're working on an aspect of the body that doesn't make sense when, pain is here, but you're releasing somewhere down below. And it just goes to show how connected that fascial network is. So let's talk a little bit more about the mechanism. Like what is this? How is it affecting what's the sound, vibration, percussion? How does it all work together to stimulate that change?
Well, we designed it to work at the Nogier frequency, which is 147 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
But the results that we were getting were way beyond what we could have imagined in our wildest dreams. And when we did more research on frequencies, we found out there's something described in PubMed. It's been published numerous times since the 60s, called the Tonic Vibration Reflex. And what that is when you're vibrating the muscle fibers between 100 and 200 times a second, and what we just happen to be right in the middle of that frequency band, that it pulls the muscle spindles at that frequency. And when the muscle spindles are pulled at that frequency range, they get excited, or they excite the the IA afferent nerves that are right next to the muscle spindles, and they release alpha motor neurons that instantly relax the agonist-antagonist co-contraction mechanism. And that's the mechanism that causes spasms, cramps, and muscle guarding. And so that was very interesting because, we have a lot of chiropractors that go up and down the spine to release all the spasms and cramps and tight muscles so that they can adjust the backs a lot easier. You can just palpate a lot easier, and the adjustment goes easier and it lasts longer. It's also why we have hockey teams are so excited about rapid release. These guys get slammed against the boards and they get the muscle guarding. And instead of being out for a few days, they're right back out on the ice 15 minutes later. And I really wouldn't have believed it, but it happened to me one time. I was riding a bike and I went around, I was on grass, thankfully, and I went around a corner really tight, and my pedal dug into the grass and it flipped me over, and the bike landed on my leg, and I couldn't put any weight on my foot, and I kind of pedaled back with one foot. And when I got in my living room, there's the rapid release laying right there. I said, well, what the heck? Let me try it. And so, one side of my leg was all bloody. And so I just put it on the other side, away from where the injury was, for about 2 or 3 minutes. And then I thought, let me see if I can put any weight on it. And when I went down, it was like it was back to normal. It was like it never happened. It was just, I think I was having muscle guarding, and I was able to completely release that in just a matter of, I don't know how long it took, but, I spent 2 or 3 minutes on it. It might have released it even quicker than that.
Well, that's one of the things I love about this instrument is it's non-invasive, man. Like you look at some of these other percussive devices that people are using, and like you're saying, they just have these giant stroke volume and they're just banging through the tissue. And even with all that power and that stroking of these other instruments, they're not even getting close to the release that you can get with this thing. And this thing is just so gentle, and like you're saying, like it kind of deactivates the back guarding mechanism of the body and just allows you to just get that full release. And like what you spoke to earlier, when you're using 2, things just melt, man. They melt within seconds.
The thing that's really interesting, I think we're overwhelming the pain gate is the only explanation I can give for it. But people that have gout in their feet, for example, that it's very painful to the touch. It's painful to walk. I mean, excruciating pain. And you can put rapid release on there and they don't feel pain. It's like it breaks up those crystals so fast that they don't feel any pain. And we've had experiences with people, burn victims, that normally have to be sedated before you can mobilize them. And they can put rapid release right on the burn. And you can actually hear the crackling and crunching of that scar tissue. And they're not feeling pain. I think that's probably one of its greatest callings is what it can do with burn victims.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you bring up a good point because, with a therapy that involves some level of percussion, you assume, and then you turn it on, you hear the motor running, you assume that it's going to be an uncomfortable experience, but it's not at all, not in the least. And it blows me away to hear that you said that you put it, over top of the burn itself, and to hear that change in the flexibility of the tissue is phenomenal. What are some other sort of therapies or sort of not other conditions that you would use the rapid release for that you've seen good success with?
Well, I've got a story that I still can't believe, but it's pretty amazing though. We had a guy that was very overweight, very diabetic. In fact, he was such a diabetic that he had a continuous monitoring system for his blood sugar. And he told me that every time he went to his chiropractor and they used it on him, that his blood sugar would drop sometimes over 100 points. And I was just like, yeah, of course it did. I just completely disregarded the guy. I'm sorry. And then it was interesting. Probably about 5 or 6 years later, we were at an athletic conference in San Diego. And this woman brought by this technology called muscle sound. And what it is, it's a diagnostic ultrasound that you can take an image of the muscle, you upload it to the cloud, and it runs an algorithm on it. And it can tell how much bonded water is in the muscles. And from that, you can deduce the glycation level of the muscles. And we just happened to have Dr. Oz's personal trainer in our booth that day. Great athlete. I mean, he's built like a bodybuilder. And so we put him on the table and we measured his calves. And his calves came out at 43% glycation, which means he's not ready to do any kind of exercise or any, let alone run to first base. And so we roughed him up. We used 2 rapid releases on each calf for 3 minutes. And then we remeasured him. And he was at 85% glycation. And my jaw dropped because right then I knew that guy wasn't lying to me. 5 years ago, I felt really bad about that. And it was interesting. Actually, the conference I met you at, remember Keto Mojo was in that conference. Mm-hmm. And they have the blood sugar tester. And a lot of that conference was on keto. And I told him, if you have anyone over here that tests really high on your blood meat, on your glycogen, send them over to my booth and let me see what we can do for them. And one woman, her blood sugar was 257. And she was feeling dizzy. I mean, and she said she hadn't eaten that day. I don't know how her blood sugar could have got that high. But we put her on the table, and she was a doctor actually too. And we had her down to 143 in 15 minutes.
Wow.
And, then it was just, it all of a sudden made sense to me what we're doing. A lot of people drink, and Debbie, the massage therapist, has been telling me this forever, especially people my age. When you drink water, a lot of it doesn't go into our muscles and we just pee it out.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a big fan of Epsom salt baths because that kind of draws the water into your muscles. But I think that rapid release is doing the same thing. It's drawing the water from your blood into your muscles. Along with it comes the sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Like, see, you learn something new every day.
And that probably explains why all the top runners and sprinters and racehorses are all training with rapid release.
What a great way to prime the body, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, even if you're not an athlete, I mean, you have a device that you can sit there and just prime your system to just work more efficiently for you, and it's such an easy thing to use.
Well, one of the demos I do for people that are over 40 is I'll work on one hand for just about a minute, and then I have them open and close both hands, and it's like the look on their face. It's like one hand feels like it's air, and the other one kind of feels like it's concrete. And I know one of the things that Debbie did to me, I mean, I work out every day and I do yoga every day, sometimes twice a day. And she worked on one of my quads and not the other. And she goes, okay, now feel the difference. And so I went there and one felt like jelly. And I'm like, okay. And then she goes, feel the other one. And I feel that and it's like stiff and it's tender. I never knew I had muscle tenderness until she, dramatically showed me like that. And I was like, wow, I do have muscle sensitivity. And I never knew it because I was just so used to it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that point because, I mean, so how many people are walking around with just in discomfort? They don't realize it, but they've got one area of their body maybe that's a little bit more inflamed than the rest. And yeah, that's something I noticed too after she worked on me at the conference. I just felt, I mean, your nervous system completely resets when you're getting a treatment. But just feeling the muscle, in the different areas of the body where are typically tight, and then to feel that sort of marshmallowy type experience of the muscle after the fact, and you realize, oh, this is actually what it's supposed to feel like, not that rigid, space that it's in. And no doubt, when it's rigid like that, of course, it's not taking up all the water very well, or the nutrients, or the other, the other cofactors that help to repair tissue when you're super tight in that state.
I have a physical therapist guy in he's kind of the physical therapist of the stars. He works for the Mayo Clinic, and they fly him around the world in a Learjet, and he goes to Saudi Arabia, to New York, to Hollywood, to London, working on the A-listers. And all he travels with is 2 rapid release Pro 2s, a 50-foot extension cord, and a $10 pulley system from Amazon. And And one of the things that he really focuses on is getting people flexible. Like a lot of back problems are caused by people that have like really tight hamstrings or tight quads or tight psoases. And we had an example at the RadFest conference in San Diego. There was a woman, very old, she's 77, and she's walking around about a mile an hour with a cane. And this is a health conference, and everybody there is all about living forever and, being healthy when you're in your hundreds and stuff. And she had a full camera crew following her around. There's 4 people, like an audio guy, a guy with a boom mic, and 2 cameras following her around every place she went. And I thought it was very interesting. She seemed very out of place, and I went and talked to her. It turned out that she was Professor Harry Sprout, or Professor Sprout from the Harry Potter movie. And she was filming a special on death. She was getting ready to die, and she was, showing what people are doing to try and stay alive. And so we pulled her into our booth, and we worked on her. And I happened to have that doctor in physical therapy who was at my booth, and we worked on her for maybe 15 minutes. And she got up and walked out without the cane.
Wow! And
she was going to go to Phoenix after that because there's a lot of old folks' homes out there, and that was the next stop on her tour. And that's where this guy's has a practice there. And interestingly enough, in his practice, he has each physical therapist has 2 rapid releases in a stretch cage, and they just put people on the stretch cage and they increase their flexibility and imbalances that they might have. And they worked on her for 2 hours, and they took a video of her. She was walking up and down the hallway swinging her arms, and she says, I don't feel 77 anymore, I'm 55.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
And speaking about the flexibility, I'm sure you're familiar with PNF stretching. That's like stretching on steroids, but when you add rapid release into the PNF stretching, so you're basically stretching your muscle to its how far it can stretch, and then you contract the muscle, and then you add rapid release to it, and we see huge gains in flexibility with that.
Yeah, she with Debbie, right? She was doing that with us at the conference as well. Yeah, it was incredible.
Jeff, can you speak a little to the amount of depth that you're getting with the rapid release versus like somebody who's getting a manual massage or using some of these other percussive devices? Because I think that's just an important thing to speak to a little bit. I mean, one of the things, what's her name? Debbie was talking about, she was talking about, like, I think manual therapists only get about a third of the way through the soft tissue, and that the rapid release just blows all the way through. And you can literally feel that. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I've got a top body worker, therapeutic body worker, and he talks about, I think, 3 layers of fascia. I don't really understand that much of what he was talking about, but he said, your fingers can only get through the first layer. And, especially people that have muscles or have chronic issues. And he said that rapid release can penetrate all the way down through. But the frequency that we're running at is in a sonic frequency level. In fact, it's right where the male and female voice intersect. And voice healing's been around since recorded history. The shamans and didgeridoo and, Tibetan bowls, and even who is it that the founder of music? I forget his name, but in Italy, he said sound is healing. And Edgar Cayce, who's a great seer, he said the future of medicine is sound. But 99.9% of that energy bounces off the air-skin barrier. And what we're doing is we're getting those same sonic waves and we're putting them directly into the skin, those compression waves. And sound waves travel very well through water. They travel much better through water than they do the air. And that's one of the reasons that pregnancy we don't like to work on people with pregnancy, because the sound waves travel so well through the body that, we wouldn't want the kid for his ears to get too much stimulus. But for example, I mean, our stroke is only a 1/16 of an inch or 1.5 millimeters, but it's going so fast. If you have someone on the table, I don't know if you've ever felt this before, but you can have your hand on their back and have the rapid release along their calf, and you can feel the vibrations coming up through their spine, through the fascia, most likely. I actually have a superhuman quality. I can actually hear my fascia adjust. I think I've got ear hairs in the back of my head or something. And so I do this like a little shimmy shake. I put the rapid release on my low back, and then I kind of shake my head around. And I know when it's all aligned, because I hear the snap, crackle, pop, and then it stops, and I know I'm good.
It's funny when you said that. I've felt that before too. I think it was probably after doing some meditation and yoga, but I remember lying down after an experience like this. Sonia and I were doing a meditation together, and I could literally feel the fascia in my head just kind of adjust. And so I know what you're saying. Like there's this, like, it's like the snap, crackle, pop kind of thing that's going on a very subtle kind of level. And it's amazing, just how that resonance in the body can shift and create that change, ubiquitously throughout the whole channels. It's phenomenal.
And just a funny story. We worked on a woman one time. We were working on her back, and she said, "That's strange. I can feel the scar tissue in my breasts vibrating." Right through her body.
Well, you go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say it's like a tuning fork, right? You hammer a tuning fork and you put it, say on your finger, and it disperses that pain or that frequency into, say, a fracture, and people can feel that pain. So that just to highlight just how deep that sound frequency goes. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to say, like, one of the things I noticed when I placed it on myself is you can feel the interruptions where you're not getting that vibration. Like a lot of times you'll feel it moving through the fascia, and then I'll move around a little bit sometimes, and like it's like there's an interruption. So I know there's an adhesion there that needs to be addressed. And that's a lot of times when I'm just doing self-care work, kind of telling me where I need to start working or moving it up the body. But like we spoke to before, I mean, a lot of times your issues where you're having your discomfort, that's not where necessarily the release needs to take place. And I hope our listeners are really listening to that point I'm making, because you can't chase pain all the time. Like where you're having the discomfort or pain isn't necessarily where the problem lies. And Jeff is speaking to this when we talk about fascia and just using these instruments. So very, very important point right there.
I think it's also very interesting when you use it on an older person with kind of loose skin. Like my dad, he's got a lot of issues on his back, like some calcium deposits and stuff like that. And then you put it on him and you can see these waves propagating throughout his back. And then when you see him, when they go over the stiff areas, it doesn't vibrate that area, or the waves bypass it. I had a really interesting experience with him when I was first coming out with the rapid release. And I took a prototype over to his house and I said, let me use this on you. He's like, oh, you're barking up the wrong tree. That thing's never going to work. You're wasting your time and money on it. And so probably about a month later, I was at the house and he had a friend over that was 65. And I said, you got any extra pains any place? He said, yeah, my shoulder. I said, well, let me use it on it. And his friend goes, you can try. It's not going to help anything. And I said, just humor me. And I put it on his shoulder, and he didn't have much range of motion on his shoulder. And after I was done, maybe 5 minutes later, he had full range of motion on his shoulder. And he said, that's impossible. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I've got a torn rotator cuff and I've got the MRIs to prove it. And he said, that couldn't have worked. And he goes, do you know what a torn rotator cuff is? And I said, no, not really. And so then my dad says, bring that damn thing over here. And I went over to him. He had broke his foot in half on a motorcycle, probably about 8 years prior. And my dad doesn't take very good care of himself. And every year he got another layer of scar tissue on there. And at the end of those 8 years, it was about the size of a pack of cigarettes of scar tissue on his foot. Oof. His foot really didn't look human. It looked like a horse foot more than a human foot. And so it turned out that he was going to physical therapy 2 to 3 times a week for his foot, and it wasn't doing anything for him. And so I put it on his foot. I ran it for just a few minutes, and he was able to walk without dragging his foot much. And so he had a pretty big improvement in just a few minutes. And then it's about a week or 2 later, he called me up and said, bring that damn thing over here again. So I brought it over, and this time I put it on that mass, and he said it didn't hurt. So I just left it on the mass for about 5 minutes, and the whole mass was vibrating. And after about 5 minutes, I saw it start propagating. So it was actually liquefying that scar tissue mass in front of my eyes. And so it took me about 10-minute treatments, but I was able to get his foot pretty much back to normal, where he can barely tell the difference between one foot and the other.
Wow.
So that was a huge breakthrough for him, and now he's a huge believer.
Oh, that's amazing, man. You look at some of these other tools being used in some of these industries, like the Graston, and I'm not knocking on Graston. Like I've had it done before. It's a very good tool, but very invasive, right? I mean, you're sitting there and you're scraping the fascia out, and they're trying to remove scar tissue and stuff. And this device does it, like I'm saying, it's a much less invasive, and it's really getting to a layer I think that the Graston tools can't even get to, man.
And one of the things I like about it is the people that are good at Graston or good at active release, they turn out to be our biggest fans. And it doesn't matter what modality you are. If you're a physical therapist, you'll come up with your own, you can combine it with whatever your knowledge is, or a chiropractor or acupuncturist, massage therapist. They all have different techniques with it that are built upon what they've already known. So they don't have to retrain themselves. They use this as an adjunct to their hands.
Well, and like you're saying, it's just a good primer, right? Like it's a way to prime the system before you get in. I like using it just to kind of loosen people up before I go in sometimes and give an adjustment. because everything just moves like a million times better once you open everybody up with this thing. And there's so many people that are just so rigid when they get on the table, right? Like we're talking with all this scar tissue or these adhesions or the soft tissue tightness. So it's just it makes our job easier as chiropractors when you can just kind of melt everything away real quick, and then you just go in there and things just kind of move on their own without having to use much force at all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is from a chiropractor, and she said, "I love using a rapid release. I feel like I'm cheating because I know that whenever anybody gets up off the table, they're going to feel great." and that's one of the things that practitioners love about rapid release is that the results are so immediate that the patient knows where he got the result from. You know, if you're using a laser or EMF, which I love those technologies, but they might feel relief 2 or 3 days later. And they might say, well, I slept good on it last night and now my back doesn't hurt or something. Or, you know, I laid off it for 3 days, now it doesn't hurt. And they don't necessarily tie it to that treatment at the doctor's office. Mm-hmm. With rapid release, they know where their pain relief came from. In fact, we're selling a lot into the regenerative medicine space. And what they're doing is, you know, they'll give you a shots in your knee for stem cells. But then what they'll do is they'll run the rapid release all around the muscles that connect to the knee. And so when the person walks out of the office, their knee feels better all of a sudden. And they're like, wow, those stem cells are amazing. You know, they never tied to rapid release. And these doctors are getting much better reviews because, you know, they're getting immediate satisfaction from the patients.
Well, real quick, I'll just second what Jeff's saying is that's one of the things I love about having that tool in my clinic, man, is, you know, there's that we have it at our disposal to use as doctors and to help people, but there's a lot of value when you see a tool like this that can give that patient that feeling when they leave your office of relief and everything's gone. Because like you're saying, Jeff, a lot of times you don't get that instant relief. It takes maybe a few treatments before you can get it. But this tool has enabled me as a practitioner to be able to give people a layer of healing and relief, really to speed up the healing where we're trying to progress to over time. And there's so much value in that, man. There's so much value in that for us to just be able to do our jobs better.
One of our doctors said his biggest surprise was the quality of the reviews after he got rapid release. Before, people were saying, you know, the doc's a nice guy, I like it, and he knows what he's doing. But after he got the rapid release, people were like, oh my God, this guy changed everything. You know, they're much more enthusiastic reviews that he was getting.
Well, and the other cool thing is people come in and they ask for it. Like when I first brought it in, I didn't know how that was going to play out, and I have no issues telling people we need to have it done. And then I have people coming in saying, can I have rapid release today? Like they just kind of know when they come in, like I need it today. So that's another plus, man.
Do you ever use it on trigger points?
Oh, buddy, all day long. Like I've learned a lot from you and then the people you've brought to the shows where I've hung out with you a little bit. And that's kind of where you guys teach me little bits, you know, and then a lot of the stuff online. But yeah, a lot of little tricks just from watching you guys at the shows and stuff like that. And then just really just playing with it, to be honest with you.
Well, one of the things I love about the show that I met you at is every doc there was, you know, there to help their patients, whether it's through diet, through supplements, or, you know, through chiropractic. And they truly want their patients to get better. I went to a pain conference in Las Vegas and I thought we would kill it there. And these doctors are like, you know, why would I want that in my office? I mean, they're coming to get their prescription every month from me. You know? And you just feel like slapping the guy, you know. And I was thinking about changing our poster to say addictive pain relief or something.
Well, you know, Nick could probably speak to that, huh, man? Because, I mean, you didn't have one of these instruments. Nick's a naturopath. But yeah. Nick, talk a little bit real quick about how you got turned on to it and finally why you decided to implement it into your practice. Yeah,
well, I mean, I got a chance to see Jeff at multiple conferences, but it wasn't until the last Newport one where Sonia and I looked at each other and we're like, and especially after Debbie did treatment on us, we just realized, because we don't do a ton of physical therapy personally as doctors, we do a lot more coaching and IV therapy and synergistic work along with people doing, you know, more physical type medicine. But after bringing it in practice, I mean, it's been amazing to see just the reaction and just, I mean, I get to use it on Sonia and to see her reaction to feel like I can actually give a proper massage now that's going to have some sort of, you know, lingering benefit for her. And she, you know, it's like the days I forget to bring her home from the clinic, I sort of get, the slant eye of like, how dare you not bring home my massage tool. But it's been powerful, and I like all the different therapeutic uses on it, and to get sort of creative with it. It's not just about pain complexes, and that was one of the questions I want to ask you. You mentioned some things about, like a massive bunion type reaction or scar tissue in your dad's foot. Obviously you can use it for plantar fasciitis and other fascia related things, but it makes me think about even like, sexual health and men with, erectile dysfunction when there's the vascular flow, or even just cardiovascular blood pressure issues in general. Maybe that, is there any sort of uses that fall outside of the typical pain syndrome? Maybe some more of what you referred to before.
Not that I can think of too much. I think proprioception is probably one of the big spaces. You're familiar with the Romberg test?
Yeah, I haven't done it in a while, but I remember it from school. Yeah.
It's for the audience. It's basically closing your eyes and balancing on one foot.
Yeah. And
we've had a lot of people that can't pass that test. And you give them a once over with the rapid release and they can pass it. There's different theories on why, but I think one of the other thing and we only have 2 data points on this, but it's pretty amazing if you have 2 rapid releases and you use the green tip, which is the real gentle one, on someone's temples when they're laying down. We've had a couple people snap out of depression. Wow. It's because you can't think. It's like a forced meditation. And you put those on their temples for a minute or 2. And when you take them off, it's like they're rebooted. And this one girl who had always had a black cloud over her head and always went straight up to her room, and her mom brought her in, and the Dr. Stanbridge, my partner, worked on her. And then at the last minute he said, well, let me just try this. And he did that. And she stood, when she got off the table, she looked around and she said, that's weird. She said, all of a sudden I'm interested in stuff. And she went home and helped her mom clean the garage. And wow. That being said, I think a lot of addiction counselors are using rapid release and getting some good release. I think one of the reasons that a lot of people are in pain is to escape their body and, taking drugs and the opioids and everything. And we've got a lot of people off drugs, a lot of people that, we're just working on them at shows, and they come back the next day and just say, I slept great last night. I didn't take any drugs, and I feel like I'm done with them. We had one gentleman at a conference. He wasn't part of the conference. They're having a Veterans of Foreign Wars conference next to us, and he just wandered in, World War II veteran, or maybe Vietnam veteran, and his neck was, I forget the name of the muscle in the front. It starts with S, I think.
The sternocleidomastoid. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his was frozen for like a couple of weeks, and they were giving him pain pills and muscle relaxants, and nothing helped him. And he was miserable. And he came over, and I released it in about 30 seconds for him. And he went away, and he came back. He was so happy. He just ate a cheeseburger.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, that answers some of the question that I was asking, is that, when you target the nervous system, and you mentioned this sort of at the beginning, just the emotional trauma that's stored in the organ system, or like the quote unquote organ system of the fascia, all the subconscious trauma, and you start to release that wherever we're, holding on to our trauma, holding on to physical, emotional, subconscious trauma. Things can start to release. And I love that you're talking about, the addiction community too, because that's definitely another community that I do work with. And just, it helps us out, I think, all as we take a step back to look at the human form as so much more than just this physicality, and to have a tool like this that merges, sound therapy into the physical, but which also can access some of this other stuff that gets stored inside of our bodies, I think it's a powerful way to look at how the body needs to heal.
One other thing I'd like to just touch on really quickly is a new theory called neuropain tags. And what that theory is that what fires together in our brain wires together. Yeah. And if you look at tennis elbow, they used to call it tendonitis. Now they call it tendinosis because there's no inflammation in the tendon. And my theory on that is, when you're hitting a tennis ball, this is kind of the neuropain tag theory, a nociceptor fires in your elbow, telling your brain that it hurts. And your brain is the final arbiter of pain. That's why some people have phantom limb pain. They can feel foot pain even though they don't have a foot. And other people may have a triple herniated disc in their back or something and not feel back pain. So it's not a perfect system. But that nociceptor fires in our elbow and telling our brain that it hurts. It happens so fast that our brain disregards it. But after you've hit that ball 10,000 times, what fires together wires together in our brain. And now your brain's trying to protect your elbow by making it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put the rapid release on your elbow, it creates a lot of sensation, but it feels good. And I kind of have them go through their motion of their, like they're hitting their tennis ball, and they immediately get about a 25% reduction in pain. And, you know, if they keep doing their stretching and stop playing tennis for a little bit and come back and get a few treatments, we've even had, we have case studies from the University of Texas where they've had people with chronic tendonitis get well.
Wow.
Very quickly.
Well, and again, just speaking back to this fascia, is it goes beyond just, you know, pain and range of motion and the soft tissue stuff. Like this is a big part of who we are, and I don't even think we've tapped into really what is really operating on that level, that layer of tissue. And, you know, just hearing you speak about these stories and these experiences and the research that's being done, we're starting to learn more. But I think it's just kind of like, how deep does the rabbit hole go kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's very, not very well understood. I do have one more good story about American Pharaoh. That was the first horse to win the Triple Crown in 37 years. That horse was lame. He had a suspensory pull, which is an injury that no racehorse has ever recovered from. And it's usually a one-way ticket to the glue farm. And they tried to auction him off. They couldn't even get the minimum bid for this horse. And so his trainer put rapid release on the tendon, and it healed his tendon. And he went on to win the first Triple Crown in 37 years. So the Nebraska Equine Performance Institute was trying to figure out what happened because they've never seen anything like it. And what they found out is that rapid release gave 10 times the microcirculation in tendons than any other modality. And they compared it to laser, TENS, PEMF, and EMS. And so the tendons have very little blood flow, so you really need to stimulate that blood flow in them in order to heal them.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
And so beneficial for all of us to really, you know, understand with when it comes to any sort of complex pain syndrome and, you know, any injury that microcirculation to turn that back on with the right kind of device is pretty remarkable. And to hear that it's going against some of these other very common therapies for, you know, tendonitis and chronic pain. I mean, it's pretty amazing to hear that. And a good reminder for us too, wouldn't you say, David?
Oh yeah, I get excited. I mean, I always learn more and more about this instrument every time I just, you know, talk to somebody that's around it. But there's more to do and to play with this thing to see what's available there for you. So I'm definitely going to start using it in other capacities now that I haven't used it before, which is fun for me. I'm always outside the box, so this is just like mad scientist now with this thing.
Well, maybe I could give you a little lesson on the tips, because there's 5 different treatment tips on it. And the big green tip goes in the same plane as the skin, so it's really gentle. I use it around the hat line a lot because people with headaches, you know, I always go around the back of the neck, kind of hit the traps, and, you know, all the muscles that connect to the neck, including like the sternum even and the pec minors. And as you kind of turn it, the side has more percussive force because it's in orbital motion, and the top is really gentle, but around the perimeter is where you get the pounding side. And so I kind of rotate it a little bit so you really work the traps, but then as you get up to the neck, you use the gentle part and just tap it up against the occipitals. And I usually put my other hand in front of the head to kind of put their head in just a little bit of traction when I do that. And then back down, I do about 4 times in each quadrant. And so one quadrant would be the trap, and then the 2 rhomboids, and then the trap on the other side. And then you go around the head, around the hat line. I do like 3 passes around the hat line with the green tip. And then there's some meridian lines right along the center of the head, and maybe about a 1/2 inch from either side. And so those 3 lines, I get those about 3 times each. And then I distract the patient for about 2 minutes, and then I ask them how their head is. And it's almost always the headache's gone. So
And that's when they get up and they give you that glazed donut look, because they're just like, they're like that's super parasympathetic, right? And they're just looking at you like, how do you feel? They're like, oh, I feel amazing. And then they're like stumbling out the door when they're walking out. No joke. I had a patient, real quick, this is funny story since we're telling stories. When you guys showed me the double arc thing using two, we were doing all that hat line stuff, and we still do every day, but I literally had a patient come up off the table and they're almost drunk because they're at that level of relaxation. So where he was just kind of like trying to find out where he was for a second as he's walking to the front desk on the way out. But he was so relaxed, and it just brought him down so fast that, I mean, they're just blown away, man.
Wow. Well, Jeff, I want to make sure we give some time for you to share, where you're at, how people can maybe access the rapid release. Dave and I obviously both have one. It sounds like David's going to get some more. I probably will as well sooner than later. But if you can share some of those details for people listening, that'd be great.
Oh, probably the best thing is to give us a call. Our website's rapidreleasetech.com, and our phone number is 949-415-4778. That's 415-4RRT. Rapid Release Tech. And we do have some unadvertised specials right now that because of the COVID, we're all in lockdown right now with this flu, and so we're giving some very good specials for people that are stuck at home. I would like to say a couple things about the virus. I know it's a tragedy for anybody that gets it, but there are some cures that are on the way right now. Chloroquine. They did a study on that, and 15 out of the 30 patients that tried it were virus-free after 6 days, and the 15 that were in the control group still had the virus. So that's an old drug that they used for malaria back in World War II, and it's generally considered very safe to use, and it's very cheap. So I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel. I think we're going to be out of this sooner rather than later. I think the virus is actually bringing us some blessings too. I think everyone's going to slow down a little bit. People are staying at home. Hopefully they're doing some meditation. I think a lot of people are looking inside and really finding out what's really important to them.
Yeah.
And I think that after this passes, we're going to, right now we're doing a lot of cooperation with a lot of other countries. We're creating new pathways of cooperation that weren't there before. And maybe in the long run, this virus will actually save lives if it reduces the amount of wars that we're in. And I think, as humans, we're seeing that we're all part of the same race. It doesn't matter what country you're in, you're still susceptible to the same things that everybody else is. And I think it's bringing us a little bit closer together as a race.
Well said, man. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I mean, it is. It's like there's part of me that wants to talk about it, and there's part of me that doesn't want to talk about it because of all the stress that's out there. But you said it, man. Like, I mean, when there's an opportunity for a global humanity to come together and work on something together, it's a beautiful thing, and definitely unprecedented in the world that we live in. So that's my blessing too, and that's my hope, is that something massively shifts on this planet collectively, consciously, and we move towards more empathy and love for humanity, and love for one another, love for this planet as well. So yeah, you said it. Thank you so much for saying that.
I think the planet's really enjoying all the peace right now too.
I would have to agree with that. Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, any last words for us? Anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I think we've covered just about everything, and it was a real pleasure talking with both of you. You sound like the kind of doctors I would like to go to.
Awesome.
Yeah, Jeff, it's been so great having you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I learned a ton. I got the rapid release literally sitting behind me, and I'm going to make sure that it's stuffed into my bag before I leave home, because I can't wait to use it on Sonia.
Jeff, thanks so much, man. Always learning from you, man, and thank you for bringing this to the world, man. I mean, it's making huge changes in people's lives, and we need more people like you going down the rabbit hole, as I said before. So
I think I would like to add one more thing. This is a class 1 medical device, and as such, we're the FDA dictates our guidelines, and I don't want anyone to take what I said as claims. our intended use is to relax muscles and relieve minor aches and pains. So
awesome. Very good, man.
Important to share.
Right.
Yeah, thank you again, Jeff. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the Dr. Dads and share with your family and friends. You can also follow and interact with Dr. Nick and Dr. David on Facebook and Instagram for a daily dose of inspiration and the latest in health and wellness. Be well.